Listen.
This is why they don't want us to work from home.
The problem with the ring light is this.
But
You
in your
see
glasses,
the ring?
yeah. This is the problem.
I'm like...
We should be recording this.
We should probably start recording this at some point. Yeah.
We probably should.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. I'm ready. I'm ready for my close-up.
Okay. Fantastic. Everybody has their ring lights on?
Yeah.
Where's yours, Michael?
It's here. I have it strategically placed so it doesn't hit my eyeglasses.
Yours is subtle. Like yours just...
Yeah.
You do have good lighting, I will say.
I have a social media...
room. You're in a new spot, no?
No, I just don't have my background on. But this is my actual house. Yes.
Well, yes, this is my house. Yes. My house too, as you can tell. Does it look like a bed though? Like, does it look like a cool sofa maybe? Like.
No, it looks like a bed, but it's fine. I've got one there too.
Bed, yeah.
Like, I'm in the den, so
it does look like a bed.
I'll just be like, I'm just in the guest room.
Yeah. Like this,
my office is the den. What am I gonna do?
There's like a symbol there. I don't know if you.
Yeah, it looks like an instrument. Yeah. So hybrid ways of working, right?
Yep.
Hybrid ways of living is what I feel like.
Oh, we're gonna. All right.
Okay. Well, I've already hit broadcast, so this is all.
There's been like a 90 seconds of nonsense, so
yeah.
It's a good way to start the.
It's fine. It's fine. You know what? It's incentive to watch the video and listen to the podcast. All right, here we go.
Absolutely.
Ready? Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And hey, we're back with the Business Not As Usual podcast. As always, I am Vince, and joining me today, my dear, dear friend, Michael. Michael, how are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic, Vince.
Oh, good.
Glad to be back. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. It's been a weird week, but you know, what are you gonna do? It's starting to. I mean, it's almost a year of this stuff.
Yeah,
and we're living where we work, working where we live, and I gotta admit, I think it's starting to get to me. The mind is playing tricks.
You were staunch that you wanted to stay home, but now, is there a crack in the armor?
There's a little crack in the armor, but I still like sleep. I don't want to necessarily wake up at 5 a.m. anymore, but I'm it's I don't think it's all sunshine and rainbows. So
right.
But that's I think that's a great segue as it always is to our topic today.
Yes. Distributed teams, remote working, and a hybrid model of working, and Vince.
Mm-hmm.
If you think back to May 16th of 2020, we had a very special guest who
wasn't that the Skydra episode?
Yes.
Oh, she's back.
And making a repeat appearance, our very good friend and one of our favorite guests, Skydra. Welcome to the program, Skydra.
Oh man, with that kind of intro, how do I go from there? It is a pleasure to be back. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
And you were the first two-time guest. Which means
that's right.
We didn't scare you enough in the first time. So
it wasn't that much of a
we're gonna have to do something. Yeah. But in that episode we talked about distributed teams and working remotely, and at that point it was fairly new to everybody.
It was fresh and exciting, Vince. And
it was.
And another thing, I'm purposely wearing a hat.
And
I'm purposely wearing a hat because in the early days, everyone was dressed somewhat like us. Well, mostly Vince and I. T-shirts, hats, sometimes turned this way, but there was hats. And now, I was in a meeting, someone had a suit on.
What?
The days of everyone being super casual like that, it's the night now, but during the day, I just had a t-shirt on. But people are wearing sweaters, and now I'm starting to see on the Instagram work from home pullovers.
Oh,
and so it doesn't seem like the casualness of a year ago, Skydra. And how are your? I mean, you were already doing remote teams, but what has changed? What stayed the same? Where you see?
Yeah, I mean, like I think before we went live, like Vince, you were mentioning this sort of like, or maybe it was the beginning of this. I can't even remember when we hit record, but this idea of it kind of getting to people. I mean, I think that's my first response to how it's going. Is I think there is a true blending of where we work and where we live, where we socialize, where we connect. The tools that I use to, personally connect with my friends are the same tools I use at work. Um, and I have friends who are frontline workers, and it's funny because I was chatting with my one friend yesterday who works in the clinic, and she's like, my life hasn't actually changed all that much. Like, I have a pretty solid routine. Like, I still see my coworkers. Like, I'm socializing with, 15 to 20 people in real life every single day. And for those who are working from home only, I think that realization of like, you haven't really connected with people in a very meaningful way for a really long time, or like groups of people outside of your immediate bubbles, or in some cases I've worked colleagues who live alone, and I can only imagine how difficult that must be right now. Like, truly, I really really empathize for them. I mean, so I think so there's like the psychological emotional aspect to it, which I think is starting to wear people down. But I mean, that your comment about people like kind of going back to this sort of professional decor, I have not actually experienced that. So that's a really interesting comment. Yeah, if anything, I feel like people are getting like even more lax, and
Oh,
and people
really?
are just
I
like
haven't.
kind of like, yeah, like it's interesting. But that's really interesting. Like, tell me more about that. Like, do you find it's a particular demographic? Do you find it's just like everyone? Like, what do you think that is?
I was gonna say I feel it was like kind of senior management types, but it's not true. I'm seeing that like there's no more hats across the board. There's no like across everybody I deal with, up and down the organization that I deal with. Um, Hats are gone. Everyone is like now everybody's got like a button-up shirt. So now I'm like, they're gonna start pulling my shirts back out of my closet, and so
Mm.
I'm interested in that phenomenon now that people are starting to just go. Um, I'm gonna go back to how I dressed at the office. Like that's what I feel like we've come around to how people are at the office. So I find that weird, and it's interesting that you don't find that. We're kind of running the same circles. So, but
Mm.
I've started to see that. Now, when I see a tie, I think I might be out. I may just turn off my camera because if people are starting to wear ties, it's over.
Yeah.
Ties are bad in normal circumstances. Like,
But when you're at home,
I'm saying,
like I don't know why anybody would even have, and also the backgrounds. Before people used to have like,
Yes,
this is my
backgrounds.
last
Talk to me about that.
vacation. This is blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like the office or a picture of an office or a picture of their actual office or some version of Teams is really like we use Teams is really bumped up their game and like backgrounds, but it's always the office backgrounds, no more any other background. So there seems to be much more formalization of working only after a year. I don't know.
yeah.
Has anybody
Is
else
it?
seen that, or?
I mean, I would hazard to guess, like a lot of things that we talk about on this show, it's down to the cultural norms of the organization. So I think we've in one way you're seeing this return to normalcy because I think genuinely people miss it. They want
Yes.
to be back in the office. They want to be at their desk and be able to close their door and on the one hand I get it. I see the value in that clear delineation between home and work. I think there's a real value there. But at the same time, I think we would be remiss to not acknowledge that the world of work has fundamentally changed as a result of everything that's happened in the last year. And so by to borrow a term from Mike, by being romantic about that past, you're not allowing yourself and your organization to advance into what is to come.
And in some ways, I feel like, and I think like Mike and I have chatted about this too in other discussions, like the romanticization is also like really misleading. Like, what are we romanticizing? Like, the way we were working before had a lot of challenges. Like, we weren't trusting people, we weren't going trust by default. We were saying you have to come into the office for no good reason other than we just want to be able to see that you're working. And like in some instances that was really the justification, right? Like especially like in larger corporations, like you get numbers next to your desk so they can account for your supplies, and that's how you're accounted for. Like but I think that is something that like is really problematic if that's sort of how we're like romanticizing the past of like this is how it was. But I think what people are craving is that separation, is that like we're going to work and I'm going to go to work and then I'm going to leave my work there. And I think what people are struggling with is like I feel like the days are longer. Like I'm not commuting to work personally myself anymore. So I'm, logging in at the time that I would be commuting, and then I'm still staying on to finish up some emails, and like maybe I'm checking my, my work stuff because I'm also socializing nearby, and it's like, oh, maybe I should just check that email, and it accumulates over time. And I think that's the really challenging thing. Like people are struggling with how do I make that boundary for myself? And maybe it is by putting a Teams background that signifies I am in an office working environment. I am going to use my office workspace background. I mean, maybe psychologically that's helpful for some people. But yeah, like on the culture front, I think I think where I am, I think that's again, we've always been accustomed to working from home, so that part hasn't changed as much. It's just we don't have the option of doing anything else. And I think that psychological like realization of you have no option, you have to work here all the time sucks. Like that sucks.
Yeah, a 1,000%. Like
I think it does suck, and I think so it's not just working from home, right? Like there are people that have kids that are at an age that they have to work. And so we talk about multitasking. So there's multitasking at work, but you're multitasking work. Then there's multitasking work, but then like home life. And that is becoming, I think, what is exhausting is that multitasking at work is really just work. You're just doing a couple things, but it's work. Now there's real multitasking. I'm supposed to be on this call. My kid doesn't understand this while the teacher is carrying on. So you have like your kids beside you, and that is hard. And then always being at home, you walk to get a coffee and then the counter's dirty, so you put stuff in the dishwasher. Like there is no separation. Like that would never happen if I was at work, but you're there, so you do it. But that's just like an extra thing, and that's because we're at home, like you said, because we have to be. Instead of kids bracket school, you could go in if you wanted, but I just choose to be at home. And then you're like, this is what I'm doing for today. So I think there's a lot going on. And I don't think we've been able to break away from, I still don't think psychologically people have broken away from, we're going back. Like this is going to end and then we're going back. Like I still think that is on people's mind still a year later.
But it's the world's theory. Like it's from Seinfeld. You know the world's theory. Where worlds are colliding. Well,
right.
allow me.
Yes,
allow me to,
worlds are colliding.
So
yes.
in the episode, George's fiance becomes friends with Elaine, and he's like, "Well, hold on.
Yeah,
I have my friend world, and then I have my relationship world, and those two should never meet.
They should not collide.
And now worlds are colliding.
Yeah,
and it creates chaos, and it's that same idea, right? Worlds are colliding. Our home world is colliding with our work world, and it's colliding with our social world, And so you get this
Yes.
mishmash of just stuff where you never really get to either turn on or turn off, right? You're like a dimmer. You're never fully up. You're just somewhere in the middle where it's enough light for you to do something, but not enough for you to, be at your best.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're recording that. That was good.
That was good. Yeah,
that was good. Wow.
The dimmer analogy was excellent, and we talk a lot about that, like protecting your energy. Like, when do you have the most energy? Like, I think, why is everything still being done in the same time frame? Like, when you really think about it, like, is there a better way we can manage schedules? Like, do we all have to have
Oh my gosh.
our meetings? Like, I think that's what's also kind of crazy. And I think we just have meetings by default, and we're having more of them because it's even easier to strike up a meeting, and it's like no agendas, no purpose, no just like like it's just like, let's have a meeting, let's talk about it, like we are not thinking intentionally about people's time, and we're not respecting people's time. Like, that's the message that sends. So that is something I think we culturally, organizations, like we need to get our heads around that, because it's also just not distributed fairly. Like, if you're a parent, or if you're a caregiver, like, and they're with you and they're beside you, like, that's just not realistic. That's just not realistic in this current time. And then, let's imagine a time when there is a better model for work-life balance. We should still respect people's time. We should do better at that.
This 8 hours of meeting nonsense is nonsense. Like, and you're right, Skydra. All we've done is we've taken our day and we've just put it into this distributed world. But you're still there for 8 hours. What you're missing are those little intermissions.
There's no intermission.
There's no intermission. So
not only
I think
there's no intermissions. There's how many that you there? Do you get those texts? You there?
Right.
Yes. Then your video conference of choice starts up, and I'm like, no one had the level of access they had to me.
It's true.
And Vince, you can attest, as they have now.
Access.
Like,
interesting.
because I wasn't in my office all the time, but now it's just like I get hammered while I'm in a meeting. I'm getting hammered about being in another meeting, and I don't know how.
Jeez.
Like, there is no thinking time. It's just like we've just become like talking all the time, like to a manic pace.
Well, because even in Teams, like, we can see when you are, quote, available. Because I see a little green ball.
Oh,
Mike's around.
There. Yes.
Oh, Mike's in a meeting now. I can't. I better not message him. Like, you can see that. Whereas before, I had to drop by your office, or I had to call you, or we had to prearrange. Like, hey, let's go get a coffee, and so that is gone. And so, Skydra said this just a couple minutes ago. We're not being intentional about time, and we're still using it very, very transactionally, and it is unsustainable. So either the people that are doing that are doing so knowing we're going back. I still maintain there is no going back, not fully at least, but we need to rethink what a work day looks like and what it needs to be. And across the organization, whether you're frontline, you're on a phone, you are servicing clients, you are an executive making decisions. Like, we have to rethink what that day looks like, because it will not. I think that's why people are starting to burn out now, especially because it's been a year, and it is unsustainable.
Okay, so here's an interesting way of approaching that question. What advice would each of you give yourselves at the peak of the pandemic, in the context of like working remotely? Like, what advice or what sorts of things do you think would have been helpful to keep in mind, or?
Yeah, Mike, I'll go first.
You go first. Yeah.
Be better about protecting your time. I think that's the one. So, and Mike, you talked about this earlier about there's no time to think. You've got to block time to think. I know this is something I'm struggling with right now because I'd like to do a lot of my thinking stuff in the morning. It's when I find that I think the best. Well, when you've got, meetings from 9 until 2,
Yeah.
and then you're not getting to think until, 3 because you'd like to have some lunch or, whatever. At that point, it's almost like it's a waste. And so being more intentional about blocking and protecting and actually like hoarding time for yourself and not feeling bad about it would be the thing.
It's the guilt, right? Like,
Yeah.
Why do we have this sense of, like, I just want to ask that back to you. Like, why do you think that guilt trickles in? Like,
I think it's still a holdover from the office.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not in the office, so people can't see me. So I want to show that I'm not goofing off. So are you there? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like letting it go. Because if I was at the office, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not. That can wait. But now you're like, I don't want anybody to think that I'm like sitting and lying down and having bonbons and watching Netflix, right? So I'm going to get back to them. I think for me, I would go, what is my role at this time? And so at the height of the pandemic, I don't think I could have it wasn't my role to take time and think. Like, my job was to take our organization and make it a at-home organization within a week, and everything that happened after that. But then there came a time where what my role is this, and when my role switched, and not like I changed roles, but as we came out of that hyper craziness, as to Vince said, blocking. So you know what? 12 o'clock is my block time. That's what I'm going to eat because that's when I'm hungry. And that is protected time. I don't care who asks for it, even if it's like my boss, that's when I'm eating. And whatever that, if it's half hour, but that is protected time for yourself. And then putting way in advance times that are protected, and you will not bend to, but I need to see you. These are my times of when I need to think, and every other time is open for everyone. And so I think you have to think of what is your role at that time, because sometimes you don't have the ability, because I couldn't at the time go, I need to put buffer in my calendar. That would have been like, I would have been serving my role as what I was doing. But there's times when you can put that, and you have to be very stringent about that. Yeah. Or else you will be, whatever your working hours are, it will be filled with people yakking in your ear. I'm telling you. And when people want to talk, like voicemail, email, those are other people's priority. You can tell I just read the practice by South Dakota. Those are other people's priority. They're not your priority. So you have to have those. You have to protect your own priority at some point.
Yeah, because you use the word buffer there, and I think that was like thinking back to my commute was it's an hour and a half each way, which is exhausting.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that time.
The time is great, but it was it was a time where work was done. I still had my work phone. I was still, able to email, but like that was downtime.
Transition, yeah.
It was transitional time, yeah.
Time. And there's no transition time.
Yeah, transition time is
none.
Shut off the computer and walk up the stairs.
But then
I'm literally in the room that I sleep in right now. So
okay, well there you go. So like,
no choice.
There is no transition.
So
No, it's so true.
Skydra, you already worked in an organization that was distributed by default, remote
Hmm.
teams. How has that, and we did talk about how you are more or less ready for this, but has that changed? Do you find that now that everyone's at home, everyone's like all in your calendar, up in your business, everybody's hyper manic about things? Like, have you also felt that? Because we were completely in the office, and now we're completely at home, and
Hmm.
it's just there's been no transition. It's just been like one extreme to the other. Like, what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, like I still loved going to the office. Like I still was the
Right,
person that like would go to the office almost every day. I felt like I had convinced myself that I would get more out of that experience because of like, I don't know, hallway conversations or just being there and people seeing me and knowing that I could be accessed. Like in some
right,
ways I went to the office because I wanted to be as accessible to my colleagues as possible. Like a lot of my role I find is being accessible. So I need to be accessible. And now that we're all on the same level of, accessibility, um, I think some people are really good at making themselves visible and making and being proactive, and some are struggling. Like I can see it. Like we haven't, we use Slack, we also use Teams, and you kind of have to be proactive to ride the wave, so to speak. I feel like you can kind of get like lost in the rubbles, or sort of like information can kind of like pass you by, and the focus isn't really on let's communicate everything really well at every stage of the game. It's a little bit about, are you in tune with what's happening? Like how do we bring in the right people at the right time and keep things moving, because things are moving so quickly. Like we're in a position of like constant delivery, and I think that's what we're really struggling with, is the employee like check-ins, is the employee communications, is the how are yous, is the do you even know what our mission or vision is at this point, like do you feel included, like. And I think that's like the balance of like it's partially the responsibility of the employer, it's partially the responsibility of the employee, but it's such a messy thing to get right, because our modes of communicating with each other are also disrupted. Like our lives are disrupted, our locations are disrupted, the ways we check in with each other are being challenged. Like, yes, we were remote by default, but the organization we're in was very old school. And so I still, we work with partners in other spaces that have gone through that exact abrupt transition, and we work with them every day. So it's like, I still think it's really chaotic. And I think we talk about user experience. I think the employee experience is chaotic, like, is really
mhm,
chaotic. Like, there's so many different channels, and it's like there's just so many waves, and you're just trying to catch the wave, and you're trying to catch the wave, and you're trying to catch the wave, and some people are drowning, and I see that, and you want to help, but you're also trying to not drown yourself.
right.
Like, so it's kind of chaotic.
Yeah, and so the other thing is like everyone is like, okay, at, we're thinking that we're coming at some point. We're all gonna go back. Like we have to go back at some point, whatever that means. And so you hear the conversation like, how many times a week do you want to go back?
Yeah,
So
I just think we're asking the wrong question.
that is, I'm glad
Like
someone
like
said
what
that.
is it, like
That
what
is
does that question
completely
even mean?
like zero. I want to go back zero times, but it doesn't mean because subjectively I can get more work done and I like being working at home. It doesn't mean I'm what problem are we trying to solve?
Yeah.
Maybe me being at home is not the best thing for the organization. Maybe be at the office 3 times a week, no matter how much I don't like it, is actually what's better for our customers, for the business, for my business model. And so I don't think we should get caught up in the how many times you want to go back. That's not the question. But I think it goes back to the old ways of working. Like, if you want to go back 5 days a week, you should. No, because if it's better for productivity and is better for the customer that you work at home 3 times a week and only come to the office 2 times a week, that's what should happen. Not, it shouldn't be left up to people to deciding what they think is like my feeling. It's like we still have to deliver for our citizens and customers.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not conceptualizing it in a way that really makes sense for the people that like will truly be impacted by some of these changes too. Like, yeah, like it's kind of like insulting actually, like when those questions are asked, because it's like
I
if
agree.
your job is to sort of start to architect the employee experience or to like lead your team or like, really count for structure, then do your homework. Think, like read the room, like read what other organizations are doing, like just think about it in a slightly different way, because it's just so short-sighted. It's just so short-sighted, and again, the way things were not great.
No.
So, like, can we move past that? Like, can we have conversations that bring us forward, and can we bring in some data? Can we ask some, like, really good questions? Can we get a spectrum of perspectives? Like, something, you know what I mean? And someone has to do that, and maybe that just needs to be delegated to someone on a team, but it has to get done.
But that is the MO of most organizations, right? Like they want to ask the easy question that gives you the wrong answer.
The surface question.
They want to scratch the surface. And in my experience, there aren't enough organizations that are willing to do that. And now we're going into my wheelhouse here. Get into that level of analytical thought, understand what problem you're trying to solve, understand what are the up and downstream impacts of your decision or of your choices, and actually thinking through, analytically what makes the most sense for us from a solution perspective. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to just say, Mike, how many days do you want to come in? 2 days.
Sweet.
Oh, okay, great.
2 3/4.
Right.
2 3/4. Can I leave on at 12 o'clock one day?
Tuesday at 11. Like,
but they don't look at the implications of that decision, and because it's a lot harder to do, and I think that I think organizations are going to have to start asking those questions, because. And I said this at the beginning of the pandemic, like the ones that do and do it well will become an employer of choice when we are into the new next normal, as McKinsey calls it. So we have to dig deeper, and we have to invest the time and the resources to do that work. And I say this not just for this problem, but for all problems. Mm-hmm. But we need to invest in doing that and actually solve the problem that we're trying to solve, and not just put a Band-Aid over it or put a fresh coat of paint on it. It's we need to get deep.
So let's try and articulate it. Like if each of us were architects of that survey, what would be some of like the really important questions to ask to get us closer to answering the problem around culture, or around mindset, or around trust? Because I think that's, to me anyway, that's the problem we're trying to solve. Is like, why do we not trust one another? Like, what has happened in the past that has led to this sort of feeling of, oh, I can't manage you if it's not this way, or I can't expect that this will get done if it's not in this way. And so, like, let's break that down. Like, let's completely disrupt that idea and let's provide examples. And I think that's what's so magical is we have examples of teams being able to deliver in this way under such pressure. And it's like, if we gave these teams a bit of breathing room, a bit of flexibility, a bit of like time, and and they weren't having to caregive at the same time, like imagine what more we could do, and how many more people would be excited and fulfilled. And yeah, like it's not about days in the office, it's really about, do you trust me as the expert on this team to do the work?
Well, I'll say this. It makes me incredibly uncomfortable because normally we're the ones asking questions of guests.
I got
and
that.
now you've asked us a question.
I don't know.
The power dynamic has really shifted.
I thought this was a conversation. I don't know.
It is a conversation. I'm just playing.
I'm sorry. No more questions.
No, it's all good. I would say, this is a consequence of, and I'm going to rehash an idea that's not mine, but this is a consequence of having way too many managers and not enough leaders. And so we have people that don't trust the people that work for them. And as a result, they are going to behave in a certain way versus folks that exemplify leadership, true leadership, and are able to bring out the best in their teams. To answer your question, though, I mean, some of the questions that I might architect into a survey like that would be around, what is it that you're currently trying to do? So back to Mike's earlier point, right? What is your role? What is it that you're trying to do right now? And then I would want to understand the barriers to success in a distributed world. So, what are the tools that you need to be able to do what you need to do? Because if there's something that you need that you can get, through cloud or through wherever in the world, then that takes that barrier down. So I think it's about understanding, and then let's go even a step further. It's not to then prescribe, okay, well, Skydra, you're based on your survey results, you're going to be coming in 2.5 days each week. I think it's then up to, you can get an optimal result. Hey, it looks like you probably should be in twice a week. And whether that's, 4 days 1 week, 1 day the next week, 3 days, like it doesn't matter. It's about getting the result. Now, and I want to acknowledge, not everybody has that type of flexibility. You think of folks that work in like a call center. It's a little harder for them. Although I would say there's no reason why they couldn't be distributed.
I think a call center can be distributed.
As I'm saying it, like I'm having this like internal debate. So anyways, Skydra, those are the kinds of questions that I would want to include on a survey or on a whatever to understand the role.
Let me throw a wrench in all of this.
Sure.
If we think outside of the companies that we work in, and the three of us, we all go into downtown Toronto, which is now a ghost town right now. And Skydra works downtown, but it's probably like 20 minutes from us, Vince, by subway, of which we could actually walk to her office fully underground.
Yeah,
we could.
Super cool.
Which is a city onto itself, which as you walk, there's stores and coffee shops and food courts, and at 1 o'clock is very lively. It is a lively place to be, which is
the
now
path is great for people watching. Like
the path is great
for people watching.
At what point do companies also have a civic responsibility? We could continue to I don't think that we could continue unless you need face to face with all the digital things we have and ways of tracking people's outcomes and their performance and their the work that they produce. We could probably all stay at home.
Mhm.
We probably could. But what happens to, so civically, from
Yeah.
civic responsibility, what happens to all those other things that happen when the work life, like, remember when we went downtown, sometimes we would leave like to get lunch at 11
Mm.
because you would have to be in line for like over a half an hour. Those things are all gone now. And so at what point do companies have some sort of responsibility to take that into consideration, not just what's best for them? And I'm just throwing it out there because there is a whole world in Toronto right now that is desperate. Like there are shop owners and business owners, they're desperate for us to come back.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an unfortunate consequence. I don't know that companies have a responsibility to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it then is incumbent on business owners and the city to rethink to re-architect what the path is. So
Yes.
I don't know that it falls
I'm not
to
sure.
to a private organization. I think it's up to the
It
city. I'm giving my perspective.
Yes.
I think it's up to the city to rethink how to leverage or redeploy that space to be something else.
So I think I think you're asking the right questions. And I think it's like really interesting because we say that it's the city's role, but the city is also really struggling to reach people right now as well. Like just consultations and like town, how does this city meaningfully get to residents is a challenge in and out of itself. Voter turnouts in general are not always great. Like it's an interesting question. I think it requires a bit of a like shakeup in a lot of the ways we make decisions.
It's a hard question.
I think,
right?
but I do think
Actually,
private organizations. I will say, I think they do have a responsibility, especially, and I think about it in the context of organizations who've been profiting from this way of working. Like I look at big distributing companies and online, distributors, like not just profiting, but like extraordinarily profiting, like to the point of like
yes,
without naming names. We're not naming
petty
names.
cash to go to space because you have
We're not naming names.
Yeah.
Can we name names? Let's be controversial.
Well,
we don't want to alienate any potential future sponsors.
Right.
You're right, Vince. Yes, control yourself, Skydra.
But it's just like of course that's part of it. Like it is. It's a huge part of this reality that we're living in that's not evenly distributed or evenly felt. But that is a really tough question, and I think, but it is so top of mind, and you're so right to point that out, and thank you for doing that, because it's like we're losing cities as we knew them. Like we're losing life as we knew it. When we go back, the things that we enjoyed will not be there. Like it's, even if we do go back, what are we going back to? Like it raises all these questions.
But again, I think and we gave our answer to the most difficult question ever asked on this show fairly quickly, but it is
that's what we
like
do.
this is an example of one of those really hard questions that requires that analytical thought,
absolutely,
to a level of depth to get an answer. So even I would say, even I won't speak for you, Skydra, even my response is still only scratching the surface and not looking at all of the issues, right? So
of course,
I still think it was a tremendous answer, but
it's sad. Like when you think about
it is.
It's actually really it is sad. It is a sad reality, and
the vibrancy, is that even a word?
Yeah,
The
it's fine.
vibrant,
Yeah, the pulse.
what
The
made
pulse of the
Toronto
city.
vibrant is actually
Mhm.
gone. And I mean, Vince, we've walked the path. Like you remember, it was just like a
Yeah.
bustling metropolis. It was all the underground, and like the city was a buzz prior to last March. And as much as I love working from home, there has to be some way of, like, it has to be rejuvenated. And then
Yeah.
if that means we have to go back 3 times a week, then maybe. But I think there's a lot of, all I'm trying to say is the question shouldn't be how many times a week do you want to go back?
Yeah.
The answer is 0.
Hmm.
Because what problem are we trying to solve? Because we could all, the three of us, probably agree, we work more, we work longer, we produce way more than we ever did. And then just all the other things that we do, we're afforded to be able to do that, like go speak at conferences, all because we're at home. But is that solving the problem? Like, is that really solving the problems of our company, of just being at home? And I think one of the questions you asked, Skydra, was, has anything changed? Have we changed at all to be ready for a hybrid model? Whatever. Everyone keeps saying that, but I don't think anybody knows what the hell that even means. I'll turn it over to brighter minds than me to talk about that. Like, what do you think about that? Have we even changed to be ready to go back in some sort of other model? No.
No, I don't think so.
No.
We're trying to cram how we used to. Again, we're doing 8 hours of meetings. We're just doing
Right.
them via Zoom or Teams or whatever instead of face to face.
Right.
So we have not rethought what the workday should look like. We have not, and we've had a chance and we haven't. And I think I'm empathetic to that because I also recognize that we're still struggling to get done what we need to get done, and we're just trying to stay afloat.
Yeah.
But I think, again, this is one of those tough questions that needs to be asked coming out of this, like as we start to wind it down, because it will wind down. We will be traveling to conferences again, but this is one of those questions, so that you can rethink what work actually means.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of it like outside of like 9 to 5 work. I'm just even trying to think about like communities I'm in. Like, have are they prepared to change, or like, are we having discussions that are just feel like bandage solutions all the time, and like I see glimpses of hope. Like, I see glimpses of like, oh wow, like why haven't we ever done this before? Like, having everyone from across Canada on one call instead of like
Right.
flying to all the different provinces. Like, we can just whip up a Zoom, and I think people are slowly starting to like accept that we should always have this kind of option. Like, there should be an option for people to dial in, to tune in. Like, that should be a default setting, and I am optimistic that that is something that's happening. But I just don't, yeah, like I think people are still kind of in like drowning mode, that like to really get into the like, so how do we like structurally change this? Like, how do we make this a policy and not an exception to the rule? Like, that's, the weeds, getting into the weeds of the problem. I'm not seeing a lot of leadership really tackle that. I'm seeing a lot of like, let's have a quick conversation or an office hour, or let's do this. And like,
Yeah.
okay, like that's fine, but we've had a lot of those, and frankly, I don't even know if those are useful as much anymore. Like, people are so busy that like they're now giving up time to take care of their kids, to listen to you, and you're not even prepared for this conversation that you're
Right.
leading in some instances. So not a lot, and not in a lot of concrete terms. Like, people are just throwing around terminology. You're right. What the heck does hybrid mean? Like, who is doing hybrid?
Uh-huh.
I'm feeling like I'm trying to be optimistic. Like, I do see glimpses of hope, but structural changes right now, I'm not really seeing that. And I think like a bit of avoidance of that question. I'm seeing a bit of that too.
But you use the word that I want to come back to, which is option.
Yeah.
And I think when we
choice.
and yeah,
Yeah.
Agency, choice,
when we
yeah,
do
trust.
get back, when we do start that journey back to back to the office, I think there's going to be a window that is going to be open where we can actually think about what would we do if given the choice. Because
Right.
again, right now there's still no choice.
Right.
We're distributed because we have to be. We were in the office prior because we had to be.
Yeah.
What happens when we have a choice? And the risk, and the reason I say that window is small, is because once you get back into the office and back into that as the status quo, as soon as you reset that default, then it's going to be hard to change.
Set. Yeah.
Then it's set again, right? We had to evolve to this quickly because we had to. We'll have more time going back to the office. But there's that window of, okay, now that we truly have choice, what is the best way to structure work? What is the best way to structure the organization? What is the best way to structure our lives? And it's that choice that I think is missing even now. So it's almost a premature question to say, what's next?
I agree. And I think that choice piece is like the biggest thing, because as much as it's been great being able to go to a conference and speak at a conference and then 1 minute later jump on a work call, there's sometimes when you have the choice of actually going away and it's super fun and you meet people, and like someone that I've been to Vegas with and Quebec with left, like he moved on, but some of those have been like the most fun times ever.
Yeah.
And that's because we were out of our house. But I think it goes back to choice. And I think Vince, you said it before, we didn't have a choice. Now we don't have a choice. The hybrid model is, what is the choice that fits the business, your customer, and yourself all at the same time? And there's a small window of opportunity, but I feel like it's like Easy Rider. Easy Rider, like we blew it, and I feel that's what's going to happen.
Well, and
we're not ready.
And by the way, that hybrid existed before. Like I infamously would go to a conference in Miami Beach, do my thing, and then check in to the office for a meeting. And unless you knew that I was in Florida, you had, and this is like just for Skydra's sake, this was not recent. This was like October 2019.
Yeah,
but like you had no idea.
You have no idea.
You would know, because I was just a guy on Teams having a conversation, facilitating work. Like you had no idea. And so it's still possible. And I think that then presents an exciting option, because now it opens up the world for yourself of where you work. Right. I've checked in from London, England. I've checked in from Hawaii on meetings in Toronto, because it's just time.
Yeah, and it's a bit of optics, like I think it's power, like losing power, like it really kind of goes back to that too, like it's just people feeling like they need.
I think it goes back to hierarchy.
Yeah, like
and
what's
romanticism.
Your model of change? What's your theory of change? What's your theory of like bringing people together and just making it happen, making things happen, motivating people. It can be hard to motivate people in a distributed way. Like you kind of need to lead a bit differently. Like you need to use different tools. You need to put into practice different techniques, and you need to practice at it. And it's hard, but it's possible. And And I think that's sometimes the roadblock too. It's like, oh, I'm not very good at this, therefore I'm gonna fail. And it's like, well, you haven't tried, or like you
Hmm.
haven't done
Right.
something, you haven't tried to lead differently, despite the fact that everyone's lives have changed drastically. So change something. Um, but yeah, I think the window for change is gonna be slim, and we really need to do everything we can to seize it. But
Hmm.
yeah, it'll be interesting when that moment comes. I think we'll know it when it comes.
Yeah, and I think we'll know it when it's passed.
Yeah.
We will know when it's passed.
And I think on that depressing note,
I think that's a good.
that's a good way to really leave on a downer. Um, but I think there's opportunity, and I think we just need to seize it. And I do think some companies will.
Yeah.
I don't think all of them will. I think some of them will struggle, but I think some of them will, and I think they will start that next true evolution that wasn't forced because of a virus, but is actually a true evolution of work. But time ultimately will tell. I feel like we could go on forever, but we shouldn't. But we will definitely have to have you back, Skydra, and
It's always a
maybe a year
pleasure.
from now when we do our next check-in,
Yeah.
when
Just keep checking
COVID-21
in.
comes out.
Keep checking in.
You heard it here first, COVID-21.
Oh my God.
Anyways,
This was awesome.
yeah.
We touched on a lot of. I'm looking at the time.
Yeah. Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of different
way over.
subjects in an hour. And thank you, Skydra. As usual, always great things to talk about, and always a great welcome guest
Yeah.
to the program. So thank you so much
Thank you both for having
taking your
me.
time and spending some time with us today.
And
No
Skydra,
pressure.
if people want to know more about you
Yeah.
or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I don't think there's many Skydras, so just Google my name and put a P at the end, and you'll
Okay.
find me.
All right, there we go.
Awesome.
And that, okay, with that then, for Mike and myself, and our guest Skydra, this has been the Business Not As Usual podcast. We will catch you in the next one. See ya.
See you, everybody.